Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's Crossover Media Featured Programmer of the Week with award-winning radio producer and host of the nationally syndicated PRI program, Echoes, with John Diliberto. Hi, John. Congrats on being our Featured Programmer of the Week. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. Thank you.
Great. So you've been exploring and exposing people to new music on radio and in print since 1974. How long have you been involved with Echoes?
Echoes is 25 years old.
Wow.
Yeah.
So Public Radio International, PRI, describes the show as a nightly music soundscape. How would you describe the show and what kind of music do you try to find for it?
The overall description of the show is it's kind of a chill show. And within that broad definition, we play a lot of different kinds of music. But I'd say the central music is ambient, electronic, new acoustic, and kind of a dream pop sort of rock sound.
It's nice to have such a variety on there. So syndicated means that the program is heard on lots of radio stations across the country, not just on a single station in a single market. How many stations does Echoes reach every week?
We're on about 110 right now.
Wow. Are you picked up at all internationally or by any online outlets?
No, we have our own online subscription service, so people can dial us up, can subscribe and hear the show on demand online whenever.
On the Echoes website?
Yep.
Oh, that's great. So what are some of your early musical influences?
I'm a child of the 60s, British invasion, psychedelic music from the late 60s, progressive rock from the 70s, jazz from the 70s onwards, new wave. Yeah, those are pretty much the DNA.
Yeah. Is it true that your first radio job was as a DJ for WXPN in Philadelphia?
Yes, it was. I was a disc jockey there, beginning in &74. I think my first show was a classical music show. I had absolutely no idea what I was playing,
Wow.
but I do remember it featured Vladimir Ashkenazy. And, and the fact that I could even get that name out at the time was, in fact, I'm not even sure I did get it out correctly at the time, but...
Wow, were you kind of put on the spot, at the time? Was it?
It was, yes. It was somebody didn't show up. We need somebody to do the shift. But the first shows I started doing were the progressive rock shows, like Diaspora. We had a show called Diaspora, which is a very hardcore progressive rock show. I did the jazz show, Blue Genesis. And I created a show called Star's End.
Yes, and on Star's End, you were actually the original producer, right?
Right. Yeah, me and another guy started it, yes.
Wow. So actually, Star's End is actually still on the air today, so that would be about 40 years now.
Yes, it will be. Yes, yeah. Chuck Van Zyl is still sitting in the pilot's chair there.
Wow, it's amazing to have such a long legacy like that. So since your early musical influences were based in rock, what was that transition like, and were you given that show by management, or was that program your idea?
You talking about Diaspora or Star's End?
Star's End, but tell us about Diaspora too.
Well, Diaspora was a show that already existed. A couple of guys, Pat Sherborne and Emmett Ryan, created it, and I kind of stepped in, and the show's kind of identify more with me than anybody else, I think. And it lasted until 1989. So from 70-something, 73, 74 until 1989. And so that's how I get into that. I just kind of trained at the station and eventually, earned enough wings to do that show. Star's End, I just created it. It was an overnight show, which it still is, Sunday morning, Saturday night. And I just had the idea of filling that slot with something, different. And we were playing the Diaspora was a high energy show. It was Mahavishnu Orchestra and King Crimson and things like that. But we also had the spacey side, Tangerine Dream and Klaus Schulze and Cluster and bands like that. We wanted to kind of highlight that. So we created that Star's End to highlight that music, which it still does today.
Wow, that's so interesting. Was it kind of the precursor did it kind of start your process to begin Echoes?
It all kind of contributed to the process. So we had another show before this called Totally Wired, and that was a new music documentary series that ran from 83 to 89. It ended when Echoes started, and that one we interviewed everybody who was anybody in contemporary music, especially on the electronic side of things. But we had everybody: Eno, Tangerine Dream, Depeche Mode, Thomas Dolby, Kate Bush, It's just, I forget, there's 126 shows, I think. And we covered a lot of people. Keith Jarrett, it was an unbelievable. When I look back on it, it's pretty incredible.
That's an amazing amount of artists there. So after you left college, I see that you did some writing for music papers and then landed a job as program director of KALX in Berkeley, California, the college radio station. What was it like being a program director back then during those political times in the 70s?
Well, actually, that was 1980 to 81, so it was out of the 70s. And that was a very tumultuous time. This was a student station, technically, air quotes. Everyone can see the air quotes, right?
Yes.
It was all community people. It was like tons of people from the community. Berkeley, USC Berkeley, and it was wild. It was well over 100 volunteers. Everyone had their own idea about what the perfect radio was. And I was kind of like just wrangling wild animals to get that thing going, and it was very exciting. Played some great music. It was really like the height of that transition from punk into new wave. So it's a very active time musically, and San Francisco was a very happening place for that kind of music. So it was a very exciting place to be. A lot of good people there.
Yeah. Are you in touch with any of those hundreds of volunteer? Are they still on radio?
There's one or two. I mean, the station manager is still one of my best friends, and she was my boss, Diane Kaplan. And then there's one or two of the volunteers I run into occasionally, but yeah, not too often. Really, it's like just barely a year, so really a blip.
Right. Oh, that's too funny. So how did you actually get Echoes off the ground? Did you do what a lot of producers do and apply for a CPB grant?
Yes, I did. When CPB had those kind of grants, yes, we got a very hefty CPB grant. In fact, we got well over $1 million from them over the course of 4 years, 5 years, something like that. So that's what launched the show. I mean, we couldn't have done it without that. I wish we had it now. Right,
everyone does. So there's so many great moments on Echoes. What are some of the highlights for you?
Certainly Brian Eno was a highlight. He's been on the show a few times, and that was always, very exciting. Those interviews were always challenging and always fun to do. So his are definitely my favorite interviews. I think we've had amazing live performances. Sheila Chandra, because we used to go out to people's homes, and we did her in a cottage in Glastonbury. I was sitting pretty much this close to her while she was singing. It was totally astounding, and we've just had so many shows like that. We've done living room concerts. It was one of the lines I have. From closets to cathedrals.
Right.
So literally closets. Aryeh Frankfurter in San Francisco playing Celtic harp, and then Paul Winter Consort at the Cathedral of St. John the Divine in New York City. So we've done them like everywhere: garages, basements, living rooms, kitchens, everywhere.
Has the technology been a big help over the years? Like all this new technology to allow you to do this?
Yeah. Well, first of all, CDs were a big help. I mean, when we launched the show, it was still records.
Right.
It was still records just as we were launching, and the CDs just completely overtook right when we started actually in production. So that was a lifesaver. I can't imagine having to do the show with vinyl, like doing 10 hours a week of produced programming. But yeah, CDs were great, and then of course the internet's been unbelievable. And when I think of what we had to do in '89, what we have to do now, that's the biggest thing. This, we didn't have to do anything. You'd send out a few mailings, and that was it. Now it's like all the social media, websites, all these other elements that go into a radio show, and that's been true for years, but more so now than ever.
Yeah, it's definitely a new world. Can you tell us a bit about your relationship with producer Jeff Towne?
Jeff Towne. Jeff is my producer. He has been with the show from the very beginning. He was there when the first show went up, and he's pretty much indispensable to the show. He's kind of the tech guru of the show. He's the IT guy of the show. He puts the program together. He produces our concerts. He knows the music, which is kind of rare to have someone with all those other talents who also knows the music. So he's kind of indispensable to the show.
It certainly sounds like it. So I hear you play flute. Is that true?
I used to play flute.
You used to play flute.
If I had it here, I'd whip out a Jethro Tull song for you.
I would have loved that. So just a few funny questions to end the interview. What profession would you choose if you weren't doing what you do now?
I'd probably be writing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd probably be writing somewhere. Yeah.
I also hear you're a big Marvel Comics fan. Would you be writing comic books?
No, I never had aspirations to actually write the comic books, and that's a long time ago too. I mean, that was back in the early days of Marvel Comics and everything. And yeah, I was definitely a big collector back then. But yeah, I don't do that too much anymore. I just watch the movies when they come out, and that's about it.
Yeah. Well, related to that, if you could have any superhero power, what would you want? Tough one.
Turn back time.
It's a good one. Well, thank you so much for your time today, John. And once again, congrats on being our selection for this week's Featured Programmer of the Week. It was great to talk to you today.
Great. Same. Great talking to you as well.
Yeah. So please check out this hangout on our Crossover Media YouTube page. It's www.youtube.com/crossovermedia. We also have lots of great artist interview material available for download on the Crossover Media SoundCloud page. You'll be able to access all of these links on our website, crossovermedia.net. Thanks again.
Thank you.